In every Minecraft world, whether single player or multiplayer, there is one common challenge: the need to stay motivated and to keep going. Yet as you immerse yourself in the game, you quickly encounter a familiar problem: item storage. The longer you play, the more items you accumulate, leading to clutter and disorganization, slowing you down and reducing your motivation to keep building. And in my 6 months of playing on the CH64 SMP Season 3 world, I've been heavily engrossed in building everything from our humble starter base through to our sprawling mega factory complex. And as such, the issue of storage has only grown ever more pressing, so it is now time to finally address it. But when it comes to sorting items in Minecraft, there are 3 main options to consider. The first is the most complex, and that is to build category-based item sorting using an assortment of very complex redstone circuitry. And whilst effective, it can be very time-consuming to set up and ultimately to maintain. So unless you have deep redstone knowledge, then it's probably going to rule it out for a lot of players. And then there's the second option, which is the basic single item sorter. And although whilst they're much simpler to construct, they do, however, require significant space, especially if you want to sort a lot of items. And in our case, there is going to be a lot that we're going to want to sort. Lastly, there is the tried and trusted manually organized chest system. And although there is a little bit more work involved in organizing this all ourselves, I think it's going to be ultimately the most straightforward and reliable option for us. So as I pondered long and hard on where to actually construct my storage hall, I initially considered placing it inside my main factory. However, after weighing up the pros and cons, I decided against it, since I wanted to keep my factory exclusively focused on housing any of my farms. So then this led me to explore other options, and during a recent live stream, I actually did clear out a rather large space over at the front of our industrial area with the intention of eventually creating an industrial dockland. It was then that inspiration struck. Why not combine these plans and actually build a cargo ship that could hold my item storage? It would be in the theme of the ideas I had in my mind around the dockyard, and it would also solve all of my storage problems. So I moved over my beacon, and then I started clearing out all of the space that we're going to be needing today. Thankfully, there wasn't actually too much for us to clear in the end. Mostly, I just had to clear out a bit of this island area here that's sticking out into our way, and then I also needed to deepen the waterway so that it had enough space for us to start building in our cargo ship. But with this all now cleared out, it means we can actually start to place down the first couple of layers of our ship, because I really want to make sure that it is very much in scale with our factory. I don't want to build something that's outlandishly large that doesn't feel like it's a part of this base area here that we are creating. So to actually kick things off, I actually then started placing in the first couple of layers of our cargo ship. Now, I'm going to be using quite a lot of terracotta. Now, if you've seen it in my previous builds, and you know I quite like it in general as a building block. And in particular, the orange color is probably one of my favorites. So I start by adding in a few layers of this. Obviously, we will transition to some other blocks and colors as well as we start to get into the detailing phases of the build. We've now built up the first few layers of the hull, and I did actually mix in a few of the acacia log planks here as well, just to break up the texture a little bit with that orange terracotta. And I do think that looks quite nice and gives it a little bit more of a sort of textured look, and maybe a bit more aged, as perhaps the ship's been at sea for a little bit longer. I'm really happy with the size of our ship here and the dimensions. I think this is definitely going to be big enough for what we need, and it's also going to be in scale with our factory. So I think we can now safely say we are good to carry on and start building up a few more layers of our ship. I added in more layers of the orange terracotta, and then I started switching towards blue to add that sort of secondary color to really kind of contrast the build a little bit more. And I'm glad I did, as I think this is starting to really bring the ship together. I then added in a final layer with the grey concrete, just so that we can slot in the rails and it properly feels like it's transitioning. I've been looking at a lot of reference images of cargo ships to give myself a bit of inspiration, but I'm very happy with how things are coming out. However, before I could actually continue any further today, I needed to go over to Arrington's Sponge Hire Shop to gather myself up some sponges ready to clear out that inner area of the hull of water. Thankfully, Arrington has them on hire for only 16 sponges per diamond, which is an absolute deal. So I paid up and then headed back to my ship to start draining. However, I quickly realized that the 16 sponges was going to get used really quickly, so I did need to make a few trips over to the Nether to try them out, which I have to say is one of the most satisfying sounds in the game. But anyway, it is now fully drained out and we can now continue building. Spending the time detailing up our ship really reminded me of just why I enjoy playing this game so much. It is just so much fun to spend endless hours just tweaking and experimenting with all sorts of extra little details into your builds to help bring them to life. And one thing that I think I learned quite a while ago now is that you really need to try and forget about what a specific item's purpose is in the game and just try and use it in different ways to add in extra details and flourishes. And a good example of this is with the iron bars, ladders and trapdoors, as they are so much nicer when used in this sort of way. And I've done a lot of that here today in our ship. Another example of this is with the iron blocks. I think iron blocks in particular are perfect for more industrial style builds, as they've got that unique texture that I think just look really nice in a lot of ways. I think I've done things in the past with stuff like aircon units and all sorts of other things, and they also look really good like this in a propeller here on the back of the ship. And then also stuff like where you can use the grindstone to add in a bit of an effect there to make it look like a giant chain. So of course this is perfect when we start adding in stuff like an anchor onto our ship. But anyway, I think our ship is now starting to really come together, and I'm loving the look of it so far. With all of that now out of the way, it's then time to start filling in the top deck area here, and I've chosen to use another alternative block, and that is the beehives, which is another great example of using a block for a different purpose. As I know you could use wooden planks, but in my opinion, wooden planks, their texture's just a little bit too noisy, whereas using something like the beehives, the top of them here just looks perfect for that decking look. However, the one drawback of beehives is that they're actually pretty expensive to craft. So unless you have a honeycomb farm, then you're going to struggle to craft any reasonable quantity of them. Thankfully, however, Howard actually sells them over at his shop, and he was actually online on the server to restock, as I'd already previously bought out all of his honeycomb supplies. So with that extra supply that Howard kindly added in for us, I was then able to actually craft up the remaining amount of the beehives that I actually need to fill in the rest of our top deck here. Something else that I'd actually really love to add, and that is some cargo containers. Now, I don't want to go too overboard, no pun intended, but I would, however, like to build in a few to kind of fill out the space that we have up here. So I went about and made a rough layout of where I'd like to position them, and I would like to use a mixture of the various colored concrete and concrete powder blocks, but I did, however, need to go and craft up some more, and then I was able to actually get started. The shipping containers themselves are not going to actually provide any kind of functional purpose. They are purely aesthetic, but I think that's fine, as it's really important to add in things like this to really add in some life and soul into the build, and it's something that I've been trying to focus on a lot more on recently to really improve my building skills. And if it's something that you like seeing, then let me know down in the comments, as I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, with the containers now built, I think we now need to think about what would actually load and unload these from the ship onto our future dockyard. So for this, I actually spent a bit of time in a creative test world, and I actually designed a crane, and I'm really happy with it, as it's something that I've not really built much of in the past. Previously, I've only really built a few small scale ones. So this is definitely one of the biggest ones that I've ever really built, and I'm really happy with it. I was really excited to actually build it on the ship, and I think that goes a long way into finishing off the whole sort of aesthetic and effect here. And you can really start to imagine what it'd be like when it docks up, and having it going along and loading those cargo containers in and out of the ship. Now, I'd actually wanted to get started and finish off building the rest of the ship, and by that I mean building in the helm, as that will finally then finish off the exterior of the ship. But for that, there was one block that I was actually missing, and it's probably one of the hardest blocks in Survival Minecraft to actually acquire. So I then went off on a little adventure into the wild to try and find it. And that block is the mushroom stem. Now, as I said, they are one of the hardest blocks to acquire. So I'd been looking long and hard for a dark oak forest, since they tend to grow a lot there. But instead, by chance, I came across one of these mushroom islands. So I think that will actually do even better for us, as we can just grow any amount that we actually need. Now, I brought with me a load of bone meal so that we should be able to grow up and chop as much as we need. However, in my exploration, I forgot one crucial thing. To actually chop down these mushrooms and actually gather the stem blocks, we need Silk Touch, and my axe does not have it. So yeah, it just breaks it back down into the individual little mushroom items. So we are going to have to go on a quick return trip back to Saltwater Island and actually buy ourselves a Silk Touch book to add it onto our axe. I feel like at this point I practically live at Harwood Shop, as I'm back once again to actually purchase the Silk Touch. But anyway, once I'd paid up, I quickly popped to the end to gain myself a few levels, as I didn't have quite enough to actually apply the enchantment directly to my axe. And then once I had the extra XP, I then enchanted it with Silk Touch and then returned to the Mushroom Island. And I was then finally able to start collecting all of the mushroom stem blocks that I actually needed for building up the helm of our cargo ship. Now that we finally had the mushroom stem blocks checked off of our wish list, it felt so good to actually get back to building and continuing on here at the cargo ship. And I've tried my best to replicate a sort of typical helm that you might find on a lot of cargo ships. As I said, I've been looking a lot at sort of reference images of real world boats and cargo ships, and I'm actually really happy with what I came up with. It's certainly one of my favorite builds to date. I've really been enjoying building in this style, and I've tried to detail in as much as possible, making use of all the sort of build tricks that I think I previously mentioned before. We're using all those sort of the iron bars and stuff, and yeah, I'm really happy with it. And I think we're moving ever closer to the point where we can actually start to lay out our actual storage area and actually get all of our items moved on in and get rid of our chest monster once and for all. I can't actually believe that it is now done, but I am honestly chuffed to bits. This has been the culmination of around 8 to 10 hours of hard work, at least in terms of all the designing, the resource gathering and the building, but I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I really can't wait to actually tear down my chest monster over on the nearby island and actually start moving in all of my storage. So we now need to just pop inside here. Now, as you can see, the first room here, the foyer, if you like, I guess, it's looking pretty empty, and I'm probably not going to tackle this one today, nor the actual helmet itself, because I want to focus much more on its main purpose, and that is the storage room. But we will sort these rooms out eventually. I don't know, when it comes to interiors, they're just not something that I necessarily relish in as much. So I just want to focus on more of the sort of the key aspects, the bits that we're going to be using the most. And then maybe later on we'll think about what we actually want to do with this whole space. But as you can see down below, we have a whole load of space ready for us to start building in a whole load of chests. Now, either side here is where I'm actually going to be building them in, as we've got plenty of space, and then we'll have this nice little walkway, hopefully, right down the middle, so we have perfect access through to everything that we'll need. But before I can actually start building in all the chests, I just need to quickly go and craft up a load, and by a load I mean a lot. I completely underestimated just how many chests I would actually need to craft, so I did actually, in between things, pop over to Archie's bulk buy barge and bought up a whole load of bamboo just so that I can craft up all of the chests that I actually need to fill in this space. I am getting more and more excited. We are getting ever closer now to being able to remove my chest monster once and for all and finally move into our new storage area. And I couldn't be happier, but all we need to do now is actually start placing in a whole load of chests. And then we can just start focusing in on prettying up the interior. I tend to neglect pretty much all of my interiors, but not here, not today, as this build is special. This build is going to be somewhere where we're going to be spending a lot of our time here on the server, so I think it is imperative that we put in every inch of effort that we possibly can and add in every little detail that could possibly come to my mind. But anyway, it is now finally complete, and I couldn't be happier. But anyway, with that, thank you for watching, but until next time, I will see you later. Bye-bye.